She walked into a dog auction with shaking hands, not to buy a pet, but to bring home the last thing her father left behind. No one knew why a 12-year-old girl would face grown men, locked cages, and a German shepherd everyone feared. No one knew that the dog standing in cage 17 was not dangerous. He was waiting. And when he looked at her, the past came back, a promise, a command, and a love that refused to die. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Rain tapped softly against the metal roof of the warehouse, a steady, patient sound. The air smelled of wet concrete and old wood, and the light inside was dim, filtered through dust and years of waiting. Hannah Brooks stepped through the heavy doors alone. She was 12, small for her age, her shoulders slightly hunched inside a gray hoodie that looked as though it had once belonged to someone older. The sleeves covered part of her hands. Her jeans were dark, worn thin at the knees, and her sneakers carried the quiet marks of long walks taken without complaint. She held a folded paper in both hands, gripping it carefully as if it might slip away if she loosened her fingers. It was the death certificate of her father, Officer Michael Brooks. The men inside the warehouse noticed her at once. They were older, most of them, broad-backed trainers, retired handlers, men with lined faces and tired eyes. Some had beards gone gray, others had the rigid posture of people who had spent a lifetime standing at attention. Their voices lowered when they saw her, then faded altogether. No one asked why a child had come to a place like this. The silence itself seemed to understand. Hannah felt it settle over her skin. She had learned since her father's death that silence could be heavier than noise. The kennels were lined in a long row, metal doors numbered in fading paint. Dogs shifted inside them, the sound of claws scraping softly, breath rising and falling. Hannah walked slowly, her gaze steady, her heart working hard, but quiet. She did not look at the men. She did not look at the auctioneer. She stopped at cage 17. Axel stood up at once. He was a German shepherd, 6 or 7 years old by the look of him, tall and solid, his black and tan coat thick even under the dull lights. His ears were alert, his body still. He did not bark. He did not growl. He only looked at her, dark eyes fixed, unblinking. Something moved in Hannah's chest then, a memory rising without effort. She was 8 again, feverish, her room dark except for the lamp in the hallway. She remembered waking in the night, confused, and seeing Axel's shape beneath her bed. He had slipped away from his post without permission. He lay there, silent, breathing slowly, as if counting each breath she took. Her father had scolded him in the morning, but softly, with a hand resting on Axel's neck. Standing in the warehouse now, Hannah understood what she had not then. Axel had not been guarding a house that night. He had been guarding her. A man stepped closer to the kennel, boots heavy on the concrete. Axel shifted his weight, muscles tightening, a low warning sound beginning deep in his chest. Hannah spoke his name, quietly. Axel! The sound of it was enough. He stopped. The man stepped back, unsettled. Someone muttered that the dog was unstable, dangerous, unfit for reassignment. Hannah heard the words and felt them pass through her without landing. She knew, though she could not yet explain how, that they were wrong. Axel had bitten a trainer once after her father died. That much was true, but the man he had bitten smelled wrong. Even now, Hannah could remember it. Oil and metal and something sharp beneath. Axel had known it too. Dogs often know before people do. Hannah lifted the folded paper in her hands. She did not raise her voice. She did not plead. She stood there, small and steady, and let Axel see her. In his eyes something softened, not weakness, but recognition. She stayed there a long moment. The rain continued its quiet work overhead. Hannah thought of her father, of the way he used to say that some things could not be trained out of a living being. Loyalty, memory, love. Axel lowered himself to the floor of the kennel, his body easing, his gaze never leaving her. Hannah felt a promise take shape inside her, not spoken, but clear all the same. She had come back for him. This time she would not walk away. Morning light filtered weakly through the high windows of the warehouse, pale and uncertain, catching dust in the air. The rain had stopped, but the dampness lingered, clinging to wood, metal, and memory. Hannah Brooks stood near the auctioneer's table with a worn envelope held tight against her chest. Inside were folded bills, counted and recounted the night before at her kitchen table, under a lamp that buzzed faintly. It was everything she had. Birthday money, grocery change saved quietly, a child's small economy built from patience and restraint. The auctioneer, a man in his late 60s with thinning gray hair and a tired face, looked at her over wire-rimmed glasses. His voice, when he spoke, was not unkind, but it carried the weight of rules learned long ago. He wore a brown jacket that had seen many winters, and his hands shook slightly as he took the envelope. Around them, men murmured. Some shook their heads. A few smiled in disbelief. A child could not handle a dog like that, they said. Axel was unstable, too strong, too unpredictable. Hannah listened without interrupting. She had learned that some truths did not need defending. They only needed to be held. When the auctioneer announced the amount, laughter rippled softly through the room. It wasn't enough, someone said. Not nearly enough for a dog like Axel. Hannah felt the sound pass through her like cold air through a cracked door. She stayed where she was, her shoulders squared, her hands steady. A handler stepped forward then, a broad man in his 50s with a heavy beard and the posture of someone who had spent his life managing danger. He wore a faded uniform shirt and boots scarred by use. He walked toward Axel's kennel with confidence that bordered on carelessness. Axel rose at once. His body went rigid. A low sound built in his chest, not wild, not frantic, but precise. The handler reached for the latch. In a blur of motion, Axel slammed into the metal door, the impact ringing sharply through the space. Men flinched. Someone cursed under their breath. Hannah felt her heart leap, but she did not step back. She spoke Axel's name softly, as if reminding him who he was. Axel. The sound reached him. He stopped. His body eased, head lowering, eyes still locked on the handler. The man froze, surprise flickering across his face. He took a step back. Silence returned, thicker now. Hannah realized then that Axel had not lunged blindly. He had reacted with intention, with judgment. Something about the handler's presence had been wrong, and Axel had known it. The label they had given him, lost control, felt suddenly thin, like paper held up to light. Later, much later, Hannah would learn the truth. The handler Axel had attacked weeks after her father's death had not been what he claimed. He was tied to Victor Crow, a name that would come to mean something heavy and dark. At the time, all Hannah knew was the feeling settling in her chest now, quiet and certain. Axel had not changed after her father died. The world around him had. The auctioneer cleared his throat, his eyes moving from the dog to the girl. His voice softened, though his words did not. There were contracts. There were lists of buyers, government agencies, security firms, men with money and papers. Hannah listened. Then she pushed the envelope forward across the table. "This is everything," she said. Her voice did not waver. The auctioneer looked down at the bills, then back at her face. Something in his expression shifted. He had seen many endings in this room, few beginnings. He nodded slowly, as if to himself. Hannah returned to Axel's kennel and knelt on the concrete floor. It was cold through her jeans. Axel watched her, ears alert, breath steady. She rested her hand against the metal bars, close enough to feel the warmth of him without touching. For a moment, the noise of the room faded. She thought of her father's hands counting change into a jar, of his quiet insistence that responsibility began with showing up. Axel lay down, his body aligned with hers, mirroring her stillness. Hannah felt a calm take root inside her, small but strong. Whatever the men decided, whatever the rules said, she had done what she could. She had stood where she needed to stand. The auctioneer's gavel came down softly, almost reluctantly. Hannah did not smile. She did not cry. She stayed there, hand on the bars, breathing with Axel, holding on to a truth she trusted more than judgment. Some things were misunderstood because they were deeper than fear. Some bonds survived because they were built quietly, when no one was watching. Evening settled over the road like a held breath. The sky was low and gray, and the world beyond the windshield felt hushed, as if it were listening. Agent Rebecca Hayes waited by the open door of a government sedan, rain-darkened pavement reflecting her silhouette. She was in her late 30s, medium height, lean, wearing a light trench coat that hung straight on her shoulders. Her hair, dark blonde and worn loose, clung slightly to her cheeks. Her eyes were steady, tired but clear. She spoke softly, the way people do when they know what they are about to say will change a life. Hannah stood beside Axel, her hands tucked into her sleeves, watching the woman without fear, only attention. Rebecca introduced herself without ceremony. Federal agent. She did not smile. She did not rush. She explained that Officer Michael Brooks had not died in an accident. Her voice did not harden when she said it, but it carried weight. He had been investigating something called Project Iron Paw, a program meant to strip working dogs of attachment, of memory, of hesitation, to make them clean tools. Axel shifted beside Hannah, ears flicking at the sound of his name. Rebecca noticed. She noticed everything. She said Axel survived because he could not be separated from who he loved. That bond had made him unsuitable, dangerous. Hannah felt a tightness loosen in her chest, replaced by something warmer. The truth did not erase her grief, but it gave it shape. The cabin sat back from the road, wrapped in pine and shadow. Wood creaked underfoot as Rebecca led them inside. The air smelled of dust and old paper. A single lamp cast a circle of light on a table crowded with folders and drives. Hannah moved slowly, touching nothing at first. Axel paced once, then lay down where he could see the door. He had learned that habit early. Rebecca set a file in front of Hannah. Inside were photographs of her father, tired but smiling, a hand resting on Axel's neck. There were notes in Michael Brooks's handwriting. Careful, precise. One page held a sentence underlined twice. If one day Axel refuses an order, it is not failure. It means he still remembers how to care. Hannah read it again, and again. She thought of the night under her bed, of the jar of coins on the counter. Her father had been trying to leave her more than answers. He had left a way to see the world. Rebecca stood a little apart, giving space. She watched Hannah read, watched Axel breathe. There was a heaviness in her posture, the kind that comes from carrying other people's endings. She spoke of Crow without using his name often, a man who believed obedience was the highest good, a man who had once been trusted. Rebecca admitted quietly that she had missed signs she should have seen, that the system was slow to look at its own reflection. Her voice caught for a moment, then steadied. She was not asking forgiveness. She was offering responsibility. Hannah felt a change then, not sudden, not dramatic, a settling. She was no longer only a child pulled along by events. She was a keeper of something fragile and true. Axel lifted his head and looked at her, eyes dark and patient. The room felt warmer, not safer exactly, but honest. Night deepened outside the cabin. The rain returned, gentle, persistent. Hannah closed the file and rested her hands on the table. She did not ask what would happen next. She knew there would be questions. Danger, maybe. She looked at Rebecca and nodded once, a small motion. Enough. Rebecca met her gaze and nodded back. Axel rose and moved closer, his shoulder touching Hannah's knee. She placed her palm against his fur and felt the steady work of his heart. Somewhere in the quiet, a promise formed. Not loud, not brave, just real. They would carry what Michael Brooks had protected. They would do it carefully. Together. Night pressed close around the cabin. Rain slid down the windows in thin lines, and the trees outside stood still, listening. Victor Crow stepped out of the darkness as if it had shaped itself around him. He was a tall man in his early 50s, lean, sharp-edged, wearing a long dark coat that hung neatly despite the weather. His hair was cut short and graying at the temples, his face clean-shaven, his eyes pale and watchful. He spoke calmly, with a voice that carried no urgency, only certainty. People like him did not raise their voices. They did not need to. In his hand was a small device, no larger than a flashlight, dull metal, unremarkable. He explained what it was without pride. A signal, a correction, something designed to remind animals of what they were meant to be. Hannah stood frozen beside Axel, her breath shallow. Axel's ears flattened, his body stiffened. When the device activated, the sound was not sound at all, just pressure, a feeling that crawled under the skin. Axel trembled, his eyes changed. The warmth in them faded, replaced by something distant and empty. Crow watched closely, as if waiting for proof. He had built his life on obedience, on the belief that anything living could be bent long enough to break. Axel turned toward Hannah. One step, just one. The space between them closed to the length of an arm. Hannah felt the cold move through her chest, but she did not step back. She did not cry. She remembered another night, years ago, when her father's boots had been wet with rain and his voice had been low and tired. She remembered Axel standing beside him, steady, listening. In Axel's mind, the signal tore open something buried. Smoke, heat, the sharp crack of gunfire, Michael Brooks's hand, heavy and familiar, resting between Axel's ears, his voice calm even then. Protect the girl, no matter what. Axel growled, a sound pulled from deep inside him, thick with confusion and pain. His muscles strained, caught between command and memory. Hannah raised her hand slowly and placed it against his chest. She felt his heart racing, fighting. "It's me," she said, barely louder than a breath. Crow shifted his weight, irritation flickering for the first time. This was not how it was supposed to go. The device slipped from Crow's grip as Axel lunged, not at Hannah, but past her. His jaws closed around the metal, crushing it with a final, decisive force. The signal died. Axel staggered, then steadied. He moved back in front of Hannah, his body a barrier, his stance wide and sure. Crow took a step back, surprise breaking through his composure. He saw then what he had refused to believe. Something had survived his system, something he could not erase. Axel stood tall, his breath slowing, his eyes returning to themselves. Hannah rested her forehead against his shoulder, the scent of wet fur and pine filling her senses. She felt a release she had not known she was holding. Crow said nothing more. He did not argue. Men like him rarely did when the truth stood breathing in front of them. Somewhere beyond the trees, distant sirens began to rise, faint but steady, threading through the rain. Later, when the world had settled and the night grew quieter, Hannah sat on the cabin steps with Axel beside her. The rain eased into a soft mist. She thought of her father, of the line he had crossed because he believed some things mattered more than control. Axel leaned into her, his weight solid and warm. Hannah placed her hand on his neck and felt the slow rhythm of him. He had nearly been lost. They both had. She did not know what would come next, only that this moment would stay with her, a reminder that loyalty could survive fear, that love could interrupt even the strongest command. In the hush of the woods, Hannah made herself a promise. She would honor what Axel had chosen tonight. She would protect the part of him that still remembered how to care. Morning arrived quietly, rinsed clean by rain. Sunlight slipped through thinning clouds, pale and forgiving, touching the world as if it had learned to be gentle. The news came in fragments at first, a radio murmuring in the background, headlines scrolling without sound. Victor Crow had been taken into custody before dawn, his coat still dark from the night air, his expression finally emptied of certainty. Project Iron Paw followed soon after, pulled into the light where it could no longer pretend to be necessary. Documents were released, hearings announced, apologies drafted by people who had waited too long to say them. Hannah listened without leaning in. She sat at the small table by the cabin window, her homework spread neatly before her, pencil moving in careful lines. Axel lay at her feet, his breathing slow and even, the tension of the past days easing from his body. When Agent Rebecca Hayes returned, she looked older than she had before. Not weaker, just honest. Her trench coat was creased now, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. She spoke of next steps, of protection, of choices. Axel would be formally retired. No more commands, no more testing. Hannah watched Axel as the word settled. He lifted his head once, ears flicking, then rested again. Retirement, she realized, was not an ending. It was permission. The therapy center smelled of clean wood and soap, of crayons and warm tea. Sunlight pooled on the floor in wide rectangles. Axel moved slowly through the room, his black and tan coat catching the light, his posture calm but attentive. The children watched him with quiet curiosity. Some were younger than Hannah, some older. All of them carried something heavy in their small frames. A woman knelt beside Axel, her hair silvered early, her voice soft and practiced. Her name was Ellen Moore, a child therapist, late 50s. She wore a simple cardigan and spoke as if every word deserved care. She explained Axel's role not as a helper, but as a presence. Axel chose where to lie. He chose who to sit beside. A boy with a cast on his arm reached out hesitantly. Axel did not move away. He lowered himself and rested his head near the child's knee, the same way he once had beneath Hannah's bed. Hannah stood near the wall, her hands folded, her heart full in a way that felt unfamiliar. This was service without command, protection without violence. Axel was still working, she realized, just differently. That evening the house was quiet again. Hannah sat by the window, finishing her assignments as the last light slipped behind the trees. Outside, leaves stirred. Inside, the wooden floor held the warmth of the day. Axel lay beside her chair, his head resting against her leg, his weight steady and reassuring. Hannah reached down and threaded her fingers through his fur, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breath. She thought of her father, of the choices he had made, of the cost. She understood now that his final gift had not been a warning, but a belief. That love, once given, did not vanish when its purpose changed. Hannah leaned her forehead briefly against the glass and whispered a promise meant for no one else. She would keep this life they had found. She would let Axel be what he had chosen to become. In the quiet room, with the light fading and the future no longer frightening, Axel sighed, a sound like rest. As this story comes to an end, I want to speak not just to the heart of the tale, but to your heart. Many of you watching today have lived long lives. You have loved deeply. You have lost deeply. Some mornings the house is quiet in ways it never used to be. The body feels heavier, the breath shorter. Illness lingers. Memories visit without being invited. And sometimes loneliness sits beside you like an old chair that never moves. This story is not only about a girl and a dog. It is about what remains when strength fades, when roles change, when life no longer asks us to fight, but to stay. Axel did not serve with force at the end. He served by being present, by lying down, by breathing beside someone who needed comfort, and that, perhaps, is the truest form of love. If you are watching this and feeling tired, or unwell, or alone, please know this: your life still matters. Your presence still heals. Even quiet kindness carries weight. If this story touched you, share it with someone who may need gentleness today. Leave a comment and tell us how you are feeling. We read them, and you are not invisible here. Subscribe to this channel so we can continue sharing stories that remind us we are not walking alone. May God bless you. May He give you strength where the body weakens, peace where the heart aches, and companionship even in silence. Thank you for being here.